Good morning, sports fans. It's Thursday morning, and I hope you had a great night at church. I know we did. Today's a big day, but by this afternoon I can rest. Today's one of our cadre meetings. I've told you about them before. They're meetings with pastors, elders, however you want to phrase it, and also what we used to call church workers or Christian workers. Anybody that's in charge of something at a church or in charge of their own ministry, evangelists, missionaries, song leaders. Oh, they're the worship pastor now, but if you're of a certain age, they're the song leader. The point is that this morning from about 9:30 until noon or a little after, we will be worshiping, praying, singing, and having fellowship together. And then the good men of the Chestnut Ridge Baptist Church, well, the men may be outside cooking the steaks, but the ladies are inside making sure everything happens. If it wasn't for the women in a church, nothing would get done. So they're putting on a steak dinner for us. I don't know why, but I'm grateful to God that they are. Good morning, Gayla. We're praying for you today. We hope you get good news. I guess in your case, good news would be them being able to do something about what's wrong with you. That would be good news. We love you, Gayla. I'm so glad to see you last night. And Charlie. So, today will be a lot of fun. And I will report back, and I'm sure somebody will take some pictures. And we can put them up. I'm going to play my fiddle, and Brother Josh is going to speak. And so I await his message. I really do. I am anticipating a great message today from a great young man. A great young man. But today we will be in chapter 23. I'm not sure. It's not a long chapter. I'm not sure if we'll finish it because there's several things going on here. And none of them really simple. It's out of order a little bit. It goes back about 5 years from where we have been to before the siege at Jerusalem by the Assyrians. Remember, the Assyrians took Israel, the northern kingdom. They destroyed Samaria. They invaded all the countries around Judah, but were not able to defeat Judah. And there were other consequences because God preserved the city of Jerusalem and fought for it and killed 185,000 Assyrians. And Assyria withdrew. And the king of Assyria was murdered by his own sons because of this great embarrassment. But a consequence of that is the power of Egypt fell a little bit, but it was not completely destroyed because Assyria wasn't able to go and finish their conquest because they couldn't leave an army as big as the one in Judah between them and home, their supply lines. Good morning, Kevin. Assyria did invade Egypt. Assyria did destroy some of their cities and take a few captives and burn up some crops. They didn't do any real damage. The Egyptians just picked up and went on, but they were hurt for a time financially and took them 2 or 3 years to recover. But this now is a prophecy that Isaiah has against Tyre and Sidon, the great port city of Tyre. in modern-day Lebanon. Then Tyre was a part of the region that became Galilee, and Sidon was to its north in modern-day Babylon, both great port cities. And Egypt has an effect on them all the way up there because all of the goods, the grain, and all these other things came from Egypt through the ports of Tyre and Sidon. And at this time, the Egyptian Navy controlled the Atlantic. We're talking 500 years before Rome could sail. I'm exaggerating, but at this time that the Egyptians ruled the Mediterranean, which was another reason why Syria couldn't be totally successful with Egypt. They would have to wait for the invasion of Babylon. One of the reasons is that they controlled the Mediterranean, and you know, and they were masters of the Mediterranean. The Egyptians were. Their clients were the Phoenicians. As a matter of fact, most people believe that the Phoenicians came from Egypt and North Africa, and they settled among the Phoenicians, of course, were Tyre and Sidon, and the Philistia, the Philistines. They were the last of the great Phoenician peoples, seafarers, traders, not traitors, traders, merchants. And it affects Tyre. Egypt affects Tyre. Egypt is always presented in the scripture as an evil or sin. Don't go to Egypt, the Bible warns. Abraham went down into Egypt and wound up with Hagar, and that created one mess. The Bible is always warning not to go to Egypt. The metaphor is to not lean on the world. Do not go to the world. Go directly to Christ. Good morning, Amy. We hope you're well today. And chapter 23 of Isaiah, the burden of Tyre. That means that God has given Isaiah a word for Tyre. And I tell you what, it says the burden of Tyre. Now, there are several burdens. We got the burden of Damascus, the burden of Moab. We have a bunch of things in Isaiah where he has burdens for different things. Burdens for kings, burdens for the word of the Lord, burdens for sin, burdens for prophecies he may or may not quite understand at the time he writes them, especially in the messianic prophecies of Jesus on the cross. But some of the commentaries, good morning, Charles. Some of the commentaries, many of the commentaries, call this chapters 21 and 22 that we just got through reading the four burdens. But there are a lot of burdens in here. You know, I don't know why they call chapter 21 and 22 the four burdens, because you have the burden of the desert, the burden of Duma, the burden of Arabia, the burden of the valley of vision. And you get through with all that, and then we have some historical stuff that we talked about yesterday about the downfall of Shebna, the overseer of the house, or the steward, the chief steward, the king's right-hand man, his downfall, and the promotion of Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, to that position. But then we start off 23 with yet another burden. So why isn't it the five burdens? I don't know why chapters 21 and 23 referred to in many commentaries as the four burdens. So the reason I'm saying anything about it is any of you Bible students, if you have something in your notes or in your books or have read why those particular burdens are called the four burdens, if you would let me know, I'd appreciate it. You can make a comment on You make a comment online, your teacher just has never known, has never found out why that is true. Because after a short historical break at the end of the last half of chapter 22, we have yet another burden, and it has nothing to do with the four previous burdens. So I'm just not sure. God bless you all. It could be your challenge. Stump the preacher. I'm always wanting to learn something, so if you found an answer to this question, I would like to know. The burden of Tyre, verse 1, chapter 23, Isaiah. How, ye ships of Tarshish? And we believe that Tarshish was way out across the western Mediterranean towards Spain. It might have been the coast of southern France. It might have been southern Spain. It might Mediterranean Spain. It might have been Gibraltar. It was somewhere where there was a great harbor, and it was somewhere where they produced a great navy. There's some arguments about where Tarshish actually is, not to be confused with Tarsus, where Paul was from. Tarsus was in Asia Minor, in Anatolia, which is what is now modern Turkey on the Mediterranean. Now, the burden of Tyre, how, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, not Tarshish, but Tyre, the port city there in what is now Lebanon, on the Mediterranean coast. How, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim it is revealed unto them. Is the harbor destroyed? It says there's no place to land. Are the docks destroyed? There comes a time when it will be, but it's not happening then. So it's this prophetic in part. And I'll explain as we go. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, those whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished. See, the Assyrians came, and Tyre was a city on the coast, and they had their great harbor. But they also had an island. And it had a great fortress on it with walls that went up like cliffs straight from the shore. Virtually unscalable. Too far from the shore to shoot a catapult into. Too strong to attack and invest by sea without explosives and things like that. No place for a beachhead. They couldn't land and make camp directly underneath the wall and gather there, make the beachhead and climb up a wall. It was thought to be impregnable, and it was for a long time. That's what it's talking about when it's talking about their isle. Now, I know that an isle is the coastline and all that, but in Tyre's particular case, there was an island. And when the invaders would come, everybody in town would just pack up all their gold and food, and they would rush across the water in boats, ships, and they would stay in the fortress until the people gave up and went on. Well, the Assyrians gave up and went on, and they went ahead and kept on going in their invasion of Egypt, which was unsuccessful. I'm sure that the people who carried it out, the generals, went home to Nineveh and bragged about it, but it wasn't much of a campaign, the Assyrians against the Egyptians at that time. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, those whom the merchants of Zion that pass over the sea have replenished. Had they replenished the isle? Well, they took all their food and supplies and their gold, and they went to the island, you see, to avoid conflict with these invading armies. So when the Assyrians came, there wasn't much to eat in the town. There wasn't any gold to rob. There wasn't any people to kill. No slaves to take, except for the poorest of the poor. Everybody was on the island. And by great waters, the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river, is her revenue, and she is the mart of nations. by the great waters. That speaks of the Mediterranean Sea, the seed of Sihor. Sihor is Egypt, the deep dark, literally in Hebrew, the deepest, the darkest. It also refers to the region in the Nile Delta that is so fertile and that waters and irrigates the greatest grain, some of the greatest grain and seed fields in the world, uh, known even today for its cotton, as we've talked about before. And at one time, Egypt was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean world. The greatest crops, the greatest amount of land planted and watered by the great Nile River, and Egyptian grain. Well, as a matter of fact, the old the old phrase is now during the days of Caesar, when he was having his dalliance with Cleopatra, they would say that the Roman army marches on Egyptian grain, and it's not that they were just eating the bread. There was some innuendo there suggesting the lewd relationship between Caesar and uh, the temptress, the great whore Cleopatra. Uh, who knows? I mean, she must have been really something special because she was able to wrap Caesar around her finger and also Mark Antony. She wasn't so lucky with Octavian. But the great river, the great waters, the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river is her revenue. The harvest of the river is her revenue. What river? The Nile River, because of the reference of Sihor, the deep, dark Egypt, the Nile Delta, Sihor. So it's because of the crops and the produce that come out of Egypt that Tyre is rich. All of those grain shipments to Asia, and then taking on other cargo. Yeah, I noticed that, Amy, but then you back up two chapters to chapter 17, and you got the burden of, uh, of Damascus. And there will be more burdens in here. All I'm wondering is why that clump of burdens that we're talking about is called it's called the four burdens. It has a little title like like the Three Amigos or the Three Stooges or the Texas Tenors. The four burdens, and I'm thinking, why are these burdens? They don't even seem to be as drastic as some of the other burdens. This burden on Tyre is pretty severe. The burden on Syria in chapter 17, it says that Damascus will cease to be a city. That hasn't yet, but it could happen any day. I've been preaching that for a few years now. That prophecy will be fulfilled. Yeah, if you come up with anything, let me know. I know what you mean. It's just always a quandary to me. Why do they call it that? We may never know, because everybody who wrote it is dead. Unless you have some video. Have you got it on a DVD? Maybe we could show it sometime. I'm kidding, of course. The great waters, the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river. See, it's the harvest of the river Nile that made Tyre rich, with all the shipping and the commerce going back and forth. They take the grain ships, they unload on the docks in Tyre. The ships from Tarshish, they come, these great mighty seafaring ships, they come to Tyre and Sidon. They load up with Egyptian grain, with flax. Remember the great flax production that was overseen out of the northern part of the lower Nile, the Delta area, and that was sent all over the world, that made the fine linen, the cloth for fine linen, for the fine dresses and shirts and everything. Uh, all of that went to Tyre and Zidon, and then they were the great exporters and importers, and it was through them that all these merchant ships, they would come and they would load that Egyptian grain and take it as far away as Britain. Take it take it around Spain and Portugal by the Rock of Gibraltar and up to the British Isles. When the Britons were living in mud, sod huts, and in caves. But you know, England has a short growing season, Ireland and Scotland even shorter. They needed that Egyptian grain. And those Egyptian galleys, they weren't seafaring enough to take them all the way up to supply all the coastlines. And that's how the merchant ships made money. It calls TYRE the mart of the nations, or the store, the general store of the nations. The Walmart of the nations is what TYRE was. Stuff would get shipped into TYRE on the Mediterranean, and it would be traded to be sent all over the world in ships and in caravans over land. It says, "Be thou ashamed, O Zidon." Zidon was a sister city just up the coast. It's in modern day Lebanon. In the day that Isaiah wrote, Tyre was actually a part of Israel. It had to do with a marriage between Jezebel, the princess of Tyre, and old bloody Ahab. I'm sorry. Something clicked in my brain, which it is apt to do sometimes, not all the time. But now and then something will click in my brain and I'll say, what is it that I'm trying to remember? And then I did. Okay, it wasn't Tyre. It was Zidon. That Jezebel was the daughter of the king. Her name actually means Jezebel, means princess of Bel, which is the Chaldean word, the Babylonian word for Baal, the great god that they worshipped. But Zidon, of course, was a sister city. But at that point, Tyre was actually a part of Israel and not Lebanon. It was in the region of Galilee, in the far, far, far northwest corner of Galilee on the coast of the Mediterranean. Be thou ashamed, verse 4, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. Zidon says, be ashamed. The sea says, I travail not, I don't struggle, I don't bring up children, I don't nourish young men. It is the countries who send ships either buying or selling merchandise that brings forth the children and nourishes the young men and brings up virgins, that gives you the money, the sustenance for your society, for people to eat and work and live and trade and make money buying and selling. The Bible's got nothing against buying and selling. As a matter of fact, that's how people made their living. They would grow crops and sell what they didn't eat. They would grow grapes, make wine, sell the wine. It's all ordered around making a coin so that you can live another day in a world where the currency is cash. It wasn't too. I mean, there was a lot of barter, but if you came from out of town and people looked at you and they say you ain't from around here, well, you better have a few coins in your pocket or you might not even get supper. And that's the way it is today. Now you show up down at the cafe. If I showed up at Rosie Joe's and forgot my wallet, they wouldn't think too big a deal about it. They just knew I would come by and pay them or catch them next time I was in there, which has happened before. Matter of fact, I've gone off and left my wallet lying on the table, and Casey held it for me behind the cash register till I got back. And my phone too. You know, this deterioration of my brain is not a recent thing. It's been going on ever since the brain surgery. But the point is that if you're going to be the currency, the trade has to do with money. And this is what happened because of Egypt. It says in verse 5, at the report concerning Egypt, what was the report? That the Assyrians had invaded and disrupted shipping. Now they didn't destroy Egypt. They didn't capture Egypt. They didn't ruin Egypt. But Egypt had to fight them, and it slowed things down. Take a modern example. There's the war between Ukraine and Russia. Both countries have been are like the number one and number two producers of not only wheat but nitrogen fertilizer in their plants. Well, American farmers, I mean, the reason we have produce the year round and such a fruitful, bountiful harvest is because of adding the nitrogen to the ground that they keep using and overusing, but the nitrogen helps keep it alive and keeps bearing. But all of that, prices of that, there's been shortages of wheat, there have been shortages of fertilizer, and the prices for those things have just gone sky high. And it's not just COVID that made those prices go up or bad government decisions or inflation. No, it's because of a war. The disturbance of war disturbs the conflicts, disturb commerce, you see. And that's exactly what they're referring to here in the entire situation. And it says that, and Zidon, it says, as at the report in verse 5 concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Tyre says, no ships came today. No grain came from Egypt. No linen cloth. No flax. And whatever else they were shipping. Then the ships from Tarshish come in to Tyre and Zidon, and they unload their trade goods. But there's no grain and no cloth to put on those ships of Tarshish to take back and sell in the Western Mediterranean. You see, it was a big depression, many businesses failed, many things closed, many concerns, many families fell from their positions. And there was a great upheaval in Tyre and Zidon because of the Assyrians. Even though the Assyrians couldn't defeat Tyre because of their fortress city, the commerce and the importing and the exporting, especially of Egyptian grain and cloth, were completely disrupted in 715, 716, and 717 BC. And this was prior to the attempted siege of Jerusalem of Isaiah's day, which happened around 713, 712. So it says here in verse 6, pass ye over to Tarshish, and hail ye inhabitants of the isle. Remember, they're all out there on that island. I know that the common use of isle and islands and isles in the King James translation is the coasts, the nations, the coastal nations. I understand all that. But we're talking about Tyre, and Tyre is a special circumstances with their little fortress island off the coast. So the invaders could come and they wouldn't have anybody to kill, and they wouldn't have nothing to steal because it'd all be out on that island. It was just virtually impregnable until Alexander would find a way to do it 400 years later. But that's another story, which we will tell a little bit at the end of this chapter. So, because the commerce is disrupted, it was Egypt and the wealth of Egypt and the production of Egypt that made Tyre and Zidon in the first place. And then it was the long trading big ships of Tarshish that would come and trade their goods and take wheat and take cloth and take other goods all along the coast of the Western Mediterranean, as I explained, even around the Horn of Portugal and up into the British Isles. We have records of the Britons trading with Mediterranean ports, going back a long time before the Caesars. That was one of the reasons that Caesar wanted to conquer Britain, and the one who worked the hardest at it, of course, was Hadrian in the early 2nd century A.D. Ken, God bless you, Ken. I'm glad you're with us today. So anyway, they're howling in Tarshish because they would take the goods. They had nothing to take back and sell after they unloaded their trade goods and sold them. There was nothing for them to return with because the booty had not come out of Egypt. The bounty had not come out of Egypt. And that's why that plays such a huge deal. The Assyrians didn't hurt Tyre and Zidon so much in Tyre and Zidon. The Assyrians hurt Tyre by stopping Egyptian shipping for a time. Enough time for people to go broke. People who had 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year contracts were just out of luck. And so that's why Tarshish is howling. And that's why Tyre on the island is howling. Because their money supply is cut off. Well, because I've been poor at times, I've had benefits with Medicare, especially when I was disabled. And now I'm not disabled, I'm just on regular Medicare, you see. But before I had Medicare because of my disability, and then when I was 65 or 6, it just translated into regular Medicare. But there were some things that Medicare would pay for because of my disability, which actually I still have, but they reclassified me since I was older because I don't have to work anymore. So I'm not able to work anymore. I'm not any less disabled. I'm just, they don't have to take care of me anymore for that disability. I have no ongoing medical issue with that part. But the point I'm trying to make is that there were things, medicine and treatments that Medicare would pay for when I was disabled that all of a sudden, when I was just on regular old age Medicare, it didn't pay for it anymore. And Jimmy Harris howled. I said, I went to Walmart to pick up a prescription that had been costing me $3, and then now it was $32. Now I howled, whoa! Well, it's just because Medicare didn't pay for it anymore. So that's why they're howling. Their money's been cut off. Their supplies have been cut off. Think about all those ships and the crews and the docks and the workers and all of those houses of trade that had men and agents running all over the countries, all over the lands, gathering and trading and buying things to ship and selling goods that had come in by ship. I think of all those enterprises of trade as ground to a halt because the Assyrians are attacking Egypt. They couldn't have any success in Tyre, but Tyre had problems from Assyria because of their war in Egypt. Now, I know I took a long time explaining that, but it does have modern examples. And it's important that you understand what happened in history because the Bible is a historic document. The things that happened in the Bible happened in real time. You need to look at what was happening in real time as these events occurred in the Holy Scriptures. So that's where our time frame will be for today and for the next several days in this burden of Tyre, and also some discussion about Egypt and Zidon and how they all interrelate, and Tarshish and world commerce at the time. At the time, it made up the biggest part of world commerce. And what are we arguing about today? And what are the big fights over among the politicians right now? It's over commerce. It's over tariffs and who gets fined and who doesn't get fined, who gets paid, who doesn't. How many people are cut off of Medicare or Medicaid? How many people are added? How much of the benefits are cut? It all has to do with commerce. Well, that's an idea, Amy. Number 4, wicked schemes of the 6, yea, 7 things that God hates. Wicked schemes. I tell you what, daughter, I hate wicked schemes too. When I was a sales manager, they called me old bullet head. Well, they called me a few other things too, but bullet head was the nicer thing that they called me. I never thought about it until they called me that. And I asked Velda, and she says, well, it just kind of depends on what kind of bullet. But anyway, yeah, they would scheme against me. Some of them because they wanted my job, some of them because they just hated my guts. Because they said all that guy ever does is talk about Jesus and people buy trucks from him. I actually quit selling, and I'll tell you why. Salesman, there's nothing wrong with being a salesman and being a Christian, nothing wrong at all. You can tell the truth, and then if your store or your sales manager doesn't honor it, you're just doing what they told you to do. It was true as far as you knew. But the thing that I had to quit is whether it didn't matter what I was selling, but I'd been selling commercial vehicles for Reliable, and the awkwardness was that when I went to visit people, they didn't know whether I was there to sell them a truck or to tell them about Jesus, and I finally had to come to the point to where I don't want people to think that I'm after something every time I show up at their house or call them on the phone. I just want to invite them to church, or I want to tell them about the Lord, or I want to talk to them about something else. And so I had to leave sales. I had to quit sales completely because of the confusion it created in my students' minds. I won't call them my followers, but there's always been a group of people who listen to me and whom I have helped to get a better understanding of the scripture, and I hope that they would be closer followers of Jesus in spite of me, not because of me, but because they understand the word better. You see, friends, if you understand the word of God, you will get closer to Jesus. And the better you understand his word, the closer you will get to him. There are no exceptions. The only thing that can separate you from Christ, and that not even that eternally, is sin. When you go to Egypt, when you go to the world instead of Christ, that causes an automatic rupture in your relationship, and that has to be repaired. Now, I have a dear friend that may or may not still be watching this program who has such a rupture. In medicine, they call it a hernia, where your abdominal cavity has got a tear, and then things move around where they shouldn't move. There's several different kinds of hernias, but that's a rupture. That's what they talk about, and that happens between you and Christ. And it's not because of a tear in the membrane; it's because of a tear in your relationship between you and Him, between me and Him, because of our sin. So when we sin, we must look to the cross, Jesus and Him crucified, and then let the blood cleanse us just like it cleansed us when we got saved. The gospel that sanctifies you is the same gospel that saves you. Glory to God. So, anyway, I believe I will close right there because I've talked long enough, and this is a natural stopping place where everybody is up in arms because the commerce has stopped. God love you.